Hey guys, welcome back to StatsB. So in the last video we discussed finding percentages of the total observations that fall within a given interval about the mean using the mean and standard deviation through what we defined as the empirical rule. But the empirical rule only applied to bell-shaped distributions. Now with Chebyshev's theorem we consider distributions of any kind. Quite exciting, right? So let's dive into it and see what it means. So Chebyshev's theorem states that for any number k greater than 1 and any kind of distribution, at least 1 minus 1 over k squared of the data values will lie within k standard deviations from the mean. Let's try to make sense of this through an illustration. Consider a distribution where we find that the mean is centered around this point. Then the interval here that corresponds to this k value has a proportion of at least 1 minus 1 over k squared of the data points within it. Let's consider if k was equal to 2. Now substituting k equals to 2 into this equation, we find that the proportion is 0.75 or 75%. And what this then means is that 75% of our data points lies 2 standard deviations away from the mean. Now let's consider examples where we use Chebyshev's theorem to either find the intervals or even find the proportions. Alright, so we have here an example where all car owners in a town were asked how much they spend on fuel on a monthly basis and found that on average they spend 2,365 rands with a standard deviation of 340 rands. So now using the Chebyshev's theorem, we need to find at least what percentage of all of these car owners are paying between 1,685 rands to 3,045 rands. And then on the second example there, we need to find the percentage of them that are paying between 1,345 rands to 3,385 rands. So first thing we need to figure out is what information has already been given to us and what the question is asking us to calculate. So let's highlight the information that we are interested in. So we have a mean here of 2,365 rands and a standard deviation of 340 rands, and the question here is asking us of the percentage, or rather proportion, and then also we are given the intervals here. And so let's look back to our diagram here and highlight also the things that we have. So we do have the interval, right? We also do have the mean or average, and then finally this is what we are asked to calculate. Oopsie. This is what we are asked to calculate. So let us first find the unknowns for us to reach this proportion. So first things first, what I would do is use one of these intervals to find my k value, because I do have some of the information from these equations. So also you have to be mindful that you also know which one of these values correspond to each of these interval values. Say I chose to pick the interval on your left, which is the mu minus k sigma. It is important that you note that it corresponds to the 1,685 rands. Now using this equation, let's try to find the k value, because we do have the mean and we do have sigma. Right, so what is the value for mu? Mu is your mean, that is equal to 2,365 minus k, which is what we want, and then the sigma is equal to 340, right, and that will be equal to 1,685, right, because I chose to use the value on the left interval. Right, let's try and now solve for k. So we are then left with minus 340, k equals to 1,685 minus this value 2,365, and then we get a value of minus 340, k equals to a value of minus 680. Then dividing each side by the minus 340, we get k equals to minus 680 divided by minus the 340. You should come to a value of 2. So now that we found a value for k, we can now find the proportion. Therefore, we get the proportion to be 1 minus 1 divided by k squared, and that would be 1 minus 1 over 2 squared, and that'll give you 1 minus 1 over 4, and this then equals to 1 minus 0.25, and this equals to 75%, and then finally, therefore, 75% of the car owners in this town pay between 1,658, oh sorry, 85, okay, 85, that's a mistake right there, and 3,045 rands for monthly fuel costs. Cool, so that's how you solve this equation. We found a proportion of 75%. Next question, we are asked to find again the proportion or percentage where the car owners rather spent 1,345 rands to 3,385 rands. Same thing applies here. What we need to do is either use this left interval value or the one on the right. For this case, imagine that we choose to use the interval value that's on your right. Then this equation becomes mu plus k sigma equals to 3,385, and then we plug in the values that we know to find k. So you have your 2,365 here plus k sigma. Sigma is equal to 340. That there is equal to 3,385. Cool. Now let's move this equation around. We have 340 k equals to 3,385 minus, bring this to the other side, that's 2,365, and we get a value of 340k equals to 1,020. Right, now let's find the k value. Your k value will equal to, so we divide both sides by 340, and then we find that we have 1020 divided by 340 will give you a k value of, let's see, 3. So there we go. This interval is basically 3 standard deviations away from the mean. Now let's plug in this k equals to 3 into our proportion equation so that we can find what the proportion is. Alright, so we have 1 minus 1 over k squared equals to 1 minus 1 over 3 squared. That right there equals to 1 minus 1 over 9. This is equivalent to 1 minus 0.11, and then we get a value of 0.89, and then this is equivalent to 89%. Alright, and then concluding, we say 89% of the car owners in this town pay between 1,345 rands and 3,385 rands for monthly fuel costs. Cool. That brings me to the end of how we then solve this equation when we are given information such as the intervals, and then we just calculate percentages or proportions. Alright, so for the very same example, in the second question that we are asked is to use the Chebyshev's theorem to find the interval this time that contains monthly fuel costs of at least 84% of all car owners. So what are we given here? We are already given the proportion, and we are asked to find these values, the intervals rather. Right, so let us see what we need to do first here. So first things first, we are given the proportion, and we know that the proportion is equal to the value 1 minus 1 over k squared, right? That's going to help us to find the k value so that we are able to find these two values. Okay, so first things first, let's isolate the k squared. Minus 1 over k squared equals to 0.84 minus 1. Okay, so the calculator value for this is minus 0.16. Cool, now let's isolate again. Let's try and isolate the k squared. Multiply both sides by k squared. So this side we get a minus 1 equals to minus 0.16. k squared. Right, and then again, so let's try and isolate k squared again. In this case, what do? We divide both sides by minus 0.16 so that we get k squared equals to 1 over 0.16. The minus signs will drop off. Basic mathematics. Now, how do we then find k? We are looking for k and not k squared. So we then go and find the square root of this value. So k then will be equal to plus minus the square root of 1 over 0.16. Put that into your calculator, but we are only going to be considering the positive square root because remember, k is greater than 1 always. So then our k value is the positive square root of this value, and that there, putting it into your calculator, will give you a 2.5. Right. With that being said, we can now find the interval values. So we have to find mu minus k sigma and mu plus k sigma. So let's substitute our values that we've just calculated, k, and also we do have the mu and the sigma. So first things first, let's start with the interval to our left. That is 2365 minus 2.5 times sigma, which is 340. And that right there should give you a calculator value of 1515. This is the lower interval. So for your upper interval, substitute again. You have 2365 plus 2.5 times 340, and then this should give you a calculator value of, let's see, 3215. Alright, so therefore, in conclusion, at least 84% of the car owners in this town spent between 1,515 rands and 3,215 rands on fuel on a monthly basis. Alright, so this brings me to the end of this video, and I hope this makes sense to you and that you had some fun learning about the Chebyshev's theorem. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next video.